Before we begin our presentation today, we would like to begin with an acknowledgement that N4 is hosted at CHIO, which is located in Ottawa, Ontario. Ottawa is built on unceded Algonquin Anishinaabe territory. The peoples of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation have lived on this territory for millennia, and we honor them and this land. Their culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. We also honor all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples and their valuable past and present contributions to this land. My name is Colleen Drake. I am N4's Project Engagement Coordinator. I will be hosting and moderating today's presentation with my colleague and co-host Mariah Maddock, N4's Partnership and Engagement Lead, who will be monitoring the Q&A box today. We have two polls that we will now launch and have the audience take part in. So bear with me for just one moment while we get those up and running. And our first is, where are you joining us from in Canada? So if everyone can jump into those polls, greatly appreciate it. Fantastic. It looks like we have some Ontario, Quebec, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, some representation from the Maritimes and Nova Scotia. Fantastic. And it looks like we've actually jumped into the second poll as well. So thank you so much for that. And this poll is, which of the following groups does your organization belong to? And it looks like in our audience today, we have acute care, community health care, health authority, government, and some additional organizations. So welcome all. And I think we've had some time to complete those. So I'll stop the polls and share those results. Just pause for a moment. Excellent. Okay, so we'll just move forward. Okay, and today's presentation, Tapping Canada's Hidden Healthcare Talent Pool, Tips and Tools to Recruit and Retain International Experience. I am now pleased to introduce you to today's presenters, Christine Curry and Catherine Penny. Christine and Catherine, I am going to ask that you turn on your videos, which you've done. Fantastic, welcome. Christine has over 30 years of experience in the Canadian healthcare system and is known for her initiatives and expertise in promoting equitable healthcare across diverse and historically marginalized populations. She is the manager of N4, which provides opportunities for professions to connect, learn, and collaborate around best practices in the field of newcomer navigation, with the ultimate goal of improving the health and well-being of newcomers to Canada. In 2022, N4's mandate was enlarged from addressing inequities of newcomers and patients in healthcare to also address barriers for internationally educated health professionals in being employed in Canada. N4's network includes over 1,200 members from over 300 organizations. Catherine is the Quality Improvement Specialist for N4. She is an experienced policy analyst and researcher. Driven to improve social equity through policy, she takes pride in providing an intersectional approach to stakeholder engagement. She has worked in federal ministries where she advances policies to improve equity for vulnerable populations. Welcome both. I just have a few housekeeping slides to get through before we get into the presentation. Today's session is being recorded and will be uploaded to our N4 platform. We will share this with you as soon as it becomes available. Should there be any technical difficulties or issues during the presentation, we will inform you with details for an alternate makeup session. Before we begin today, I would like to take a moment to introduce you to some more of the platform features. Throughout today's session, we invite you to write your questions in the Q&A window. We know that sometimes many of you might have the same question or be interested in a particular response. Today, you have the option of upvoting. So please upvote questions you're interested in hearing an answer to, and we will prioritize those questions to pose to the speaker first. With that said, let's jump into today's presentation, and I'm happy to pass the virtual podium over to Christine Curry. So over to you, Christine.
Thanks so much, Colleen, and thanks in advance for advancing the slides on my behalf. I'll just wait for the next slide. I just thought I'd provide a quick overview of who exactly N4 is in case those of you who are joining the call are not familiar. So we are a national network, as Colleen said, and really our goal is to make sure that newcomers have equity in Canada in the health and social service spaces. So our primary mission as we began this work in 2019 was really focusing on newcomers as patients or clients within those spaces, and this year added in the additional mandate to look at the other side of the bedside, newcomers who actually are providers in our space, and specifically those who are internationally educated nurses and internationally trained physicians. And we've had the great pleasure of working alongside those wonderful people who have immigrated to Canada. I'll go to the next slide for the sake of time. So just an orientation to what does N4 offer? Our tagline is to connect, learn, and collaborate. So we do have a member directory, which has a wonderful feature where you can just quickly click on somebody's name if you want to connect. And we've seen those fabulous connections made across Canada of those who are healthcare providers, may have a newcomer who's moving provinces, want to connect with another colleague who might be in a different province and can find them on our database and quickly connect with them to to consult with them. I should say membership is free. We encourage people that we don't want any barriers. So our funder, IRCC, thankfully has included membership as being free for anybody who's interested. So please do sign up. We have a meeting place where you can consult with each other, post quick questions, tell others of what's happening around the country that you think they should be interested in. That just-in-time peer connections are wonderful. We feature events. So if you have an event that you think would be of interest to others across Canada, we put that on an events calendar. So try to promote other people's. We're always keen to see reduce duplications. So if somebody has a learning event, for instance, we want to spread that awareness so that others aren't trying to also develop the same type of events. In our Learn, as we have today, we have webinars. Usually these are through subject matter experts that we invite where there's material that doesn't exist or a really interesting best or promising practice, we feature them in our webinars. When we need that in-depth case analysis, we do professional development series and post those. Most recently, we had a clinical ethicist who guided some of our internationally trained providers to understand in the Canadian environment, what does that look like? Securing consent, looking at privacy, looking at dealing with different family structures. We always try and curate as much as we can, again, reducing duplication. So we have an e-learning catalog. So if others have publicly available e-learning, we get their consent and then put them in this e-learning catalog. So a one-stop shop where you can search and say, maybe I want information, sessions that are available around equity issues or Indigenous health or so forth. So they are there in our e-learning catalog. We have a resource toolkit. So lots of people developed lots of tools. I know I developed, for instance, in my days during CHIO, an Arabic pain scale for pediatrics. So that is available. Resources that others are willing to share are within that toolkit. Again, very easily searchable. One of the things we heard from providers as you're perhaps going for funding or doing a presentation yourself, that you really want a quick access to information so people do informed decision-making or promote to informed decision-making. We have publicly available data that our research coordinator puts into really visual snapshots that you can easily grab and then put into your own either documents or presentations. So that work is been told that's very helpful. We have a couple of programs through St. Paul University partnerships. One running right now is that we have some internationally educated nursing and physicians taking a course for non-clinical skills that we heard that were real barriers to feeling like I'm prepared for the Canadian experience. So, you know, a set of lungs is a set of lungs. But when you come to Canada, the expectations around how do you communicate as an interprofessional team versus maybe your home country might be different. So we have a very flat hierarchy. So physicians and nurses consider each other colleagues, but maybe in somebody's home country, they would have seen that relationship as hierarchical. And so when it comes to communicating, they wouldn't understand that, you know, if a physician asks a nurse, for instance, on how the patient's doing, they really expect a synopsis of their clinical setting and status, and not just fine, thank you as a response. They wouldn't see that as a fulsome response, but maybe that's the way you communicate unless you were asked more specific kind of questions in your country of origin. On our collaborate, we have a community of practice. We're going to talk a bit more about that later on, so I won't delve into that, but really that's a short term. We bring people together for 6 to 8 meetings, the best, you know, bringing the best brains to the table and produce really evidence-based products that will really address the root causes of inequities for newcomers. So we've had various tools that we produce. This employer toolkit being one of those, but we've got an Afghan toolkit. We've got for those who are treating refugees from Afghanistan, Ukrainian toolkit, same thing. We have a position paper around interpretation standards. And then we have our subject matter experts that we've engaged. We have about 40 of them who have enlisted with CHEO within 4, and they're available if we have a question we receive from our community and our members that need an expert opinion. Then we provide that facilitation to introduce you to those subject matter experts, and those are featured on our platform as well. I'll go to the next slide, Colleen. So now in today's topic, why are we talking about IEHPs? Why did this come? Most people may know this, others may not, but actually in our latest census, 23% of Canadians were born outside of Canada. This is our main economic strategy. More long-term Canadian families have 1.2 children. We're really not reproducing ourselves. So if we want to maintain our labor market workforce, we really needed to rely on immigration. We've also seen, of course, baby boomers aging. They're aging out. We saw so many retirements, especially COVID kind of prompted a lot of people to retire. So really it has become our main economic strategy of Canada to maintain our labor market force is immigration. So this is not going away. This is a long-term strategy that we've embarked on. So we sometimes get that question, will this go away? Is this a short-term effort in terms of equity for newcomers? But no, this is definitely a long-term issue for Canada that we need to address. Go to the next slide. So this brought us to our HHR crisis. Of course, that's linked, retirements and lower number of people in that market of 18 to 65 age range of workforce. We saw this coming. The nurses certainly put out a report in 2007 saying by this 2022, we will need 60,000 nurses, we're predicting, due to retirement. Then COVID hit. That was just, insult on top of injury. And so now here we are in StatsCan showing that over 150,000 job vacancies within healthcare alone across Canada. So really, as we did our work in this space, every employer we met with across Canada identified this as their number one issue, is finding enough staff within their healthcare organization to do the work. And so that recruitment and retention was a high priority need. And I'll go, the other thing that we also heard was very open as we received their funding announcement in April of last year. We had employers knocking at our door saying, I'm hoping your work will really provide us the tools that we need for this, and thus this toolkit was developed. So if we look at immigrants, we know that we very much desire them. We have these recruitment efforts that go on continuously where we're going to other countries. And indeed, HESA just produced a report this month from a national basis saying, their number, if you look at the recommendation, the number one recommendation is let's find a way to facilitate recruitment from other countries where we know that they produce a surplus of healthcare employees, and see if we can streamline that. That is great. Here's the problem with that. The problem is that even when we immigrate people, our statistics show that in Canada, less than half end up working, whether they're nurses or physicians, end up being successful in becoming nurses and physicians in Canada. And there's multiple reasons why that happens, but it just shows that just recruiting externally, if you go to the Philippines, that's not the whole solution. And getting more Filipino nurses, there are tens of thousands of nurses in Canada waiting for and hoping to become nurses and are just not being successful. I'll go to the next slide. So what did we do around this? We did other work, again, looking at those barriers on nurses and physicians. We have 2 working groups that are looking at those barriers. But meanwhile, we did hear that need for the employers to say, okay, tell us what our role is, tell us what we can do to help. And certainly we heard from employers, you get these cold calls or emails of folks saying, I see you have a posting, I want to be a nurse, I want to be a RNA, I want to be a physician, but I just help me with the process. So what we decided to do was develop this toolkit. So we started out again with that outreach, really understanding the status of what are people seeing, what are the strengths that you're seeing, what are the barriers. We look for best and promising practices in that phase. And so in January, we really started putting that all together to have this draft report. And thus today we're doing the launch of the report, which we're so pleased to give you. I'll go to the next slide. In our outreach phase, we did do outreach across Canada. We sometimes have a worry that's raised to us. Is this going to be an Ontario-centric product? Definitely not. We did virtual site visits with 9 different provinces with 20 sites. Who did we visit with? So health authorities, your ministers of health, the government. So, we have this immigration issue for sure. We have employment standards and so forth. In terms of the different centers or employers, we definitely met with acute care, those hospitals. We have long-term care, as well as community health settings. So we really tried to tap on the breadth of players within this space and really understand and come forward with these recommendations. Go to the next slide. So I'm going to turn it over to Catherine, who is going to talk about exactly what did we find, walk you through our tool, and then I'll stick around at the end, make sure if there's any questions for me as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Christine. Hello, everyone. My name is Catherine Penny, and I'm looking forward to presenting the findings and discovered promising practices to support employers as they recruit and retain international experience and address the health human resource crisis. Throughout today's webinar, I'll be using a few acronyms that I wanted to provide. I'll be using IEHPs to refer to internationally educated health professionals. I will be using IENs to refer to internationally educated nurses. And I'll be using ITPs to refer to internationally trained physicians. We heard from our lived experience consulting group that the term ITP is preferred over IMG, internationally medical graduates, as ITP accurately reflects the years of experience trained physicians arrived to Canada with. In the next slide, I will show the 3 takeaways from today's webinar. We hope your takeaways are a further understanding of the diversity and the untapped potential of IEHPs and how this has and continues to lead to brain waste. You will also come away with a more fulsome understanding of the challenges and barriers IEHPs experience when attempting to be optimally employed in Canada. Lastly, we will provide you with promising practices, tools, and resources to support healthcare in the recruitment and retention of IEHPs. As Christine alluded to at her introduction, every corner of Canada is experiencing the health human resource challenge. No profession, healthcare sector, province, or territory have gone untouched. The employers we met with throughout our engagement all expressed this reality, but also shared a resounding willingness and spirit to find solutions. Thank you to those we connected with. Before going into our findings, I wanted to share how our employer consultation project falls into our work. In 2022, N4 received an expanded mandate from IRCC to understand the barriers IEHPs experience as they work towards being optionally employed in Canada. N4 leveraged its highly effective COP structure to create time-limited, goal-oriented working groups to address the pathways for both ITPs and IENs. We also created a space for ITPs and IENs with lived experience to discuss, validate, and inform our work. It became clear throughout the early stages of this process that employment in of itself is a critical step in the pathway, especially once credential assessment and licensure is completed. Understanding the barriers employers experience was a needed addition to understanding this work, and this was the genesis of our employer consultation project. In a 4-month window, we met with over 20 organizations from acute care, community health, long-term care, governments, and health authorities. From our stakeholder engagement, which was followed by analysis, 6 barriers and shared challenges were identified. We have divided them into 2 themes, system and organizational. At the system level, there is growing competition across new jurisdictions. The HHR crisis is an international crisis, and the labor shortage of healthcare workers can be felt across global borders. Employers are now searching for ways to make their organization an attractive environment within the global market, as well as defend against international recruiters seeking Canada's workforce. As one employer said, it's no longer neighboring communities or large organizations we are competing with. Instead, employers are competing with provinces and international jurisdictions. This is an entirely new landscape for employers, and it brings distinct challenges. We have seen provinces being pitted against each other, especially in the absence of a national approach. A policy change in one province can create ripple effects across Canada. This heightened competition and this new landscape requires new tools and new strategies. We have also seen the uniqueness of rural and remote communities. These communities have long-standing and unique challenges in recruiting and retaining skilled professionals. In many ways, they have faced their own HHR crisis for quite some time now. These long-standing challenges become amplified when recruiting and retaining internationally educated professionals. We've heard throughout our engagement that newcomers come to Canada to build a life and to live, not just to work. And it can be difficult to integrate into rural and remote communities in the absence of religion, culture, and language support. Strong leadership from both employers and the community is required to foster successful integration of IEHPs into rural and remote communities. We also know that both partners can benefit. Newcomers from moving to a close-knit, more affordable community, and rural communities for obtaining highly skilled professionals. Lastly, there is continued importance for a pan-Canadian collaboration. Employers noted that the lack of access to best or promising practices on the subject has created an information vacuum. This relates both to the HHR crisis and resources to support IEHPs. This has amplified and increased the severity of this crisis. An employer said, "I often find myself searching for reliable and easy accessible information." Despite the new competition previously discussed, employers noted their desire to address the root of this issue by forging connections and sharing strategies on a pan-Canadian basis. At the organizational level, employers have challenges in providing immigration, housing, and settlement support. An employer in the Atlantic region said it perfectly. The onus is increasingly more on employers to assist with newcomers into settling into Canada. We've heard organizations assisting in the immigration process, finding adequate and affordable housing, and locating childcare services. These aspects of settlement are now a prerequisite for successful recruitment and retention. Many employers we spoke with feel unequipped to address these responsibilities. This is an added landscape for HR departments. there's limited training and corporate knowledge, and it also has created additional stress, created hidden financial costs for organizations, and has become an administrative burden. Addressing the importance and challenge of IEHP integration was a common challenge within our analysis. We know that IEHPs bring a wealth of expertise, cultural knowledge, language skills, and more to an organization. In addition, they are a reflection of our growingly diverse communities. In many ways, they are a mirror to our patient population. Ensuring their successful integration is therefore essential for the future of our healthcare. The experience of Jennifer Lopez highlights the challenges and difficulties experienced by IEHPs. Jennifer is an IEN. She's a co-facilitator for a consulting group, and she's also the president of the Integrated Filipino-Canadian Nurses Association. In her case, despite speaking 3 languages and having over 20 years of experience prior to arriving to Canada, Jennifer had to make the decision to redo her university degree once arriving in Canada. This was her choice and was the most efficient route for her to become a nurse in Canada. However, this additional time and the financial burden is not realistic for other IENs and adds to the brain waste, the number of IEHPs who have already immigrated to Canada but are underemployed. It is estimated that $12 billion annually is lost because of this employment challenge. Lastly, the social justice movement of 2020 created an influx of equity, diversity, and inclusion commitment statements from organizations. However, there is a limited resources and understanding of how to translate these commitments into strategies, and this is needed in order to identify and measure progress in this area. There's a notable lack of focus on newcomers as a distinct population who require support and resources. And in addition, there's even more lack of support for understanding how many IEHPs exist within individuals' organizations. These metrics and EDI strategies are essential given newcomers are underemployed and are a key component to solving our HHR crisis. Now, our outreach highlighted the challenges and shared themes, but it also unveiled many facilitators and promising practices. These promising practices include the importance of mentorship, the benefits of provincial IEHP navigators, and creating ethical recruitment by leveraging IEHPs in Canada. Mentorship is by far the most important tool employers can offer IEHPs. Luckily, it can be shaped to fit employers of all sizes. Our analysis has shown how offering effective mentorship can improve relationships and increase retention rates. On the other hand, without mentorship, IEHPs feel lost and undervalued. A stakeholder in Manitoba said, if IEHPs do not receive this support, it follows a disastrous trajectory where mistakes can be made and mistrust between employees grows. Offering successful mentorship is not easy or quick. In fact, it can take upwards to 18 months. We've discovered promising practices to assist employers in their ability to offer mentorship. We've seen employers create clinical positions dedicated to integrating IEHPs. We've also seen employers survey staff to inquire interest in mentoring IEHPs, offer incentives to mentees by using government funding and grants, leverage recently retired or soon to be retired healthcare professionals to mentor, and lastly, provide staff training on the value of IEHPs and the value they bring to your organization. What should successful mentorship offer? It should offer culture integration, community integration, settlement support, and learning how to adapt clinical skills to the Canadian context. We've heard that nurses require adaptation, including learning medication, proper protocols, and technology. These are the type of clinical skills they'll need to learn. In terms of cultural integration, an example of training IANs would require include learning soft skills, such as understanding the nuances of communication, interprofessional teamwork, and the culture safety for Canadians. We've heard anecdotally, and as Christine mentioned earlier, that IANs at first do not realize the important role nurses play in reporting to physicians. This is an example of a soft skill that nurses require when they become a nurse in the Canadian context. We also know that soft skills are often the hardest skills to learn. But we also know that integration does not end when IHPs are employed, but continues for months after they onboard. And that's why taking your time to mentor IEHPs are critical. On the right-hand side in red, you will see examples of resources provided in our toolkit. These are just a few examples, high level, to show the type of support we have in our toolkit. They include information on settlement support, community integration, and cultural integration. As previously mentioned, there are information vacuums. Resources are hard to find and continuously changing. There's value in having professional navigators aligned to provinces who can assist both IEHPs and employers. For employers, having a provincial navigator provides a central, reliable point of contact, and this can decrease the challenges they experience when they're looking for information on immigration, settlement, and regulatory information. We've heard a lot of employers say, I'm an expert in many things, but immigration is not one of them. Provincial navigators are also beneficial for newcomers. For newcomers, it provides accurate guidance on an array of subjects. In our work, we have come across programs that are often catered to IHPs, but that do not assist them in obtaining licensure. The existence of these programs emphasizes the importance of having one spot for reliable information. It also emphasizes the onus. If we are welcoming and asking for trained professionals to come to Canada, we should have navigators in place to support them. There is not a single recipe or one-size-fits-all that can accommodate all IEHPs. They're not a monolithic group. They have distinct personal stories, educational country of origin, socioeconomic statuses, personal relationships, etc. All of this impacts their ability to integrate into Canada. Provincial navigators and the ability to offer that one-to-one support on an array of topics is very impactful. This brings me to the Government of New Brunswick IEHP Navigation Service and IEN services. They offer these services for employers and newcomers. This was a discovered practice we came across in our work. The New Brunswick model was created in 2017 to help those trained outside of Canada looking to practice as a nurse and assist with required competencies. They offer immigrant support, regulatory liaison consultant, and settlement support. The biggest barrier is the time it takes for IEHPs to keep pushing from beginning to end. If there's no one to help or reach out to, they'll get discouraged. That was a quote from one of our employers. This model has been successful in New Brunswick. They have moved from supporting 5 IANs to now working with approximately 400 IANs per year. We encourage you to connect with your provincial government to learn more on their programs, policies, and resources to support IHP navigation. Lastly, Canada must create and implement ethical recruitment strategies and leverage IEHPs in Canada. As said earlier, only 40% of IEHPs in Canada are optionally employed. The rest are working in underemployed positions related to healthcare or have to find precarious jobs. It is tragic to have foreign-trained, skilled healthcare professionals working at Wendy's or with Uber. We also need to take the brain drain of health professionals into ethical consideration. We are inviting health professionals from the developing world to the developed world, and the loss of highly educated professionals, doctors, nurses, scientists, engineers, arguably the fabric of a nation, can have profound impacts on the country of origin. This is really important, especially through our work we have heard IEHP say, I felt lured here, or if I had known, I wouldn't have come. This speaks to the complexities and how demoralizing this process is for IEHPs. ethically sound strategies consist of leveraging IEHPs who have immigrated to Canada, who are here looking for work. Luckily, we have come across innovative strategies that relates to this and that all employers can adapt. Sunnybrook Health Science Centre is located in Toronto, Ontario, and they have an innovative program called Sunnybrook's IEN Career Pathway. This pathway provides a holistic and collaborative approach to support IENs to re-enter careers in healthcare and transition into registered nursing positions, both RN and RPN. They have ethically recruited nurses by posting a poster on their staff bulletin board looking for IENs within their organizations. What they discovered were a number of IENs working in non-clinical roles, such as healthcare aides, environmental services, and food services. Once the IEN identified themselves to human resources, Sunnybrook provided a virtual information session on the pathway to licensure. Since then, they have created a product where if you interview for them, they ask you about your international education prior to being hired. They've also posted public advertisements within their community asking for anyone who is an IEN to contact them, their HR department. And this allows those who are working precarious jobs to be notified of this pathway. Lastly, Sunnybrook also connected with local colleges and universities to discover IENs. They noted the positive retention rates they've experienced from this approach, as it has fostered a relationship and trust between IEHPs and their organization. There are many key takeaways from this program, but I'd like to highlight 3. First, how they leverage programs from the federal and provincial government in order to deliver this program. Sunnybrook specifically leveraged a relationship between the College of Nurses of Ontario and Ontario Health, and are utilizing a program called Supervised Practice Experience Partnership, SPEP, to implement this program. Second, they've offered mentorship and a holistic approach, such as cultural integration, skill building, and communicating, and relationship and community building. And I think this is really important. IENs who have lived here for many years and are working at Sunnybrook may need different skills than an individual who has just arrived. And I think this speaks again to how diverse this population is. Sunnybrook is meeting IEHPs where they are at. Lastly, they understand how important and the value IEHPs bring to their organization. Their cultural knowledge, their language, and their expertise in their field. And this, of course, is helping them combat the HHR crisis. This concludes our findings from our presentation. For further reading on this topic, please read our report. It's over 20 pages and filled with further information and details on the topics presented today. We'd like to note that our French version of this report is coming soon. We also have an accompanied toolkit with comprehensive tools, resources on an array of subjects, including retaining newcomers, supporting ITPs, supporting IENs, rural support, provincial navigators, financial support to newcomers, newcomer settlement services across Canada. Regarding next steps, our toolkit is now launched and is available on our website. I encourage you to download it via our QR code or on our website, and I believe there is a link now in the chat for you to view it. Today's webinar will be available to view at any time via our website. We kindly ask that you share this resource with your network. Coming soon, we have a checklist for employers to assist them in the recruitment and retention process of IEHPs. We're really excited for this to be announced. As noted, this topic is continuously changing. Every day, there's a new resource or a new change in policy. As a result, it's really important for us to have this toolkit be evergreen, constantly updated. The N4 team will be sharing and updating the resources to reflect the current state. I highly recommend that you subscribe via our website. That way you can stay apprised of the latest information. We're also excited to announce more deliverables on the topic of IEHPs and improving the pathway to employment. My colleague Kat Goodfellow wrote a report based on the site visits we've had to date. This report details the licensure pathway, the barriers and areas for improvements for IEHPs. It's a wonderful, fulsome report that I encourage you to read. We also have forthcoming webinars dedicated to IANs and ITPs that consist of a report that came out of our working groups. I highly recommend that you attend these webinars to learn more about ITP, the part of the solution, not the problem, recommendations for welcoming international trained physicians into Canada's healthcare sector, and also IAN's report, welcoming internationally educated nurses into the Canadian healthcare sector, recommendations for change. And I believe both of these webinar registrations are in the chat for you to register to. Lastly, we'll have a visual pathway to licensure for IANs and ITPs coming in April. Thank you very much. This leads me to the question portion of the presentation.
Thank you so much, Catherine and Christine. That's fantastic, and we've had some great questions popping up. So those are coming from our audience. We'll dive into those and get started. So we do have a question. Are any of the attendees aware of a successful practice within their organization where they were able to overcome bias against training, hiring? And we're just asking if the audience can share that. So if there's anyone, just go ahead and pop that in the chat. And then our first question, I would like to learn more about the employer checklist. When will this be available?
Great, thank you for that question. Yes, the checklist will be available in April 2023, May 2023, sorry, in the spring. And the checklist will be a resource for employers to use when hiring IEHPs. They will have an array of questions for you to answer and resources that follow it. For example, to make sure that your interview process is unbiased, here are a few information and tips to ensure that happens. Are you recruiting ethically? Yes or no? If not, here are a few considerations for you to take into account when you're hiring. And as I said, it'll be available in May 2023. And again, I really recommend that you subscribe to our Employer Toolkit notifications, and that way you'll be notified of its development and when it's ready. Thank you for that question.
Wonderful. Thanks, Catherine. Everyone will be looking for that in the spring. The next question is, I'm interested in learning more on Sunnybrook and the Government of New Brunswick programs. Do you know more of where I could find this information?
Yes, thank you. They're very wonderful programs. And we actually have 2 webinars that were hosted on N4 that goes into details about both of those programs. And it's a really great resource for you to use and to get a more fulsome understanding of their programs, both at Sunnybrook in Toronto, Ontario, and of course, the Government of New Brunswick IHP Navigator work. And so I will just put those in the chat for individuals to be able to see. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. And those can
Maybe
also be found on the N4 website under our
Yes.
past webinars. So if you're not a member of N4, go there. There's some great resources. Sorry, Christine.
No, and I was going to say the exact same thing, Colleen, but also add membership is free. Just a reminder, I think I mentioned it earlier, but we don't want that to be a barrier for people to promote equity. So membership is free into N4.
Okay, and then the next question, how can you use credential assessment in the Canadian system? So looks like specifically as a physician, if that resonates.
Yeah, so there is a process for a physician who's immigrated to Canada to have, or even if they have not yet, if they Google physicians apply, that's your very first step as a physician to say, what is the process to get credentialed? Yeah, it guides you through. It's a bit complicated to answer in fulsome, but that would be their good first step. There are also navigators for physicians. There's an association called AIMGA, AIMGA. It stands for Alberta International Medical Graduates Association, but they have They started only in Alberta, but they're now national. So that's also, if you want a bit of support around how to do that process, that's an organization you might want to reach out to.
Wonderful. Thank you, Christine. I have a comment. So great presentation. And just a follow-up question. We are having HHR challenges when it comes to recruiting an audiologist and physiotherapist. Has there ever been thought to develop resources for these professional groups? Maybe we'll direct
Sorry.
that to
Yeah.
Christine. Great.
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to unmute. Yeah, definitely. We know our original mandate that we were asked to look at from IRCC was physicians and nurses to focus on those specifically. That said, a lot of the results are similar, right? Regardless of the profession, we saw similar barriers. And so I'd encourage you to go to the site visit report that Catherine referenced that speaks to those barriers, but also some of the facilitators for them. They are credentialed as well. They fall under the regulatory health acts for those professions. And so one of the complexities, of course, in Canada is that you have all these, each province has their own regulator for these professions. So you really need to almost know, well, which province do I want to immigrate to? And then connect with that college and then talk through that credential process. So, for physicians, they have a single physician apply. Nurses have what they call NNAS, the National Nursing Assessment Service. They're probably something different for, I think they were mentioning, physiotherapists you mentioned, and audiologists. So they would have their colleges are really the first stop shop to say, what is their process? And what we've seen, even over the course of our 6 months in this, is the colleges themselves are starting to augment their website information about those who are interested in immigrating, knowing that, as Catherine mentioned, this is now an international competition. Historically, I would say, you mentioned my 30 years. When I started in nursing 30 years ago, it was, what day do you want to start? And then, then we had a surplus of nurses. So it was like, oh, you interviewed. And so we were back to the days of, oh my gosh, when can you start? And we're catching up to the need to really view all professionals, whether they've immigrated or not. Our focus is now on much more of recruitment and retention and less on that risk moderation kind of viewpoint that we've had in HR of saying, okay, how can we solve the problems, or how do we choose? How do we become the choosiest? How do we recruit the best of? It's really become a very different scenario in these past years, thanks to baby boomers aging and, of course, the impact of COVID.
Thank you very much, Christine, for the very detailed response. I will jump on to the next question. Obviously, it looks like there's some interest from the rural communities. Will you be extending this work to look at hiring and recruitment within the rural and small community areas? And Catherine, I think you might just have a mute.
Apologies.
There we go.
Yes, definitely. That is something that N4 is looking forward to working on, as it came up throughout our research and through our consultation with employers. Those in rural and remote communities and the employers and health providers have experienced this type of crisis for a long time now when it comes to retaining skilled professionals. And it's something that's very unique and something that needs its own set of engagement and analysis and outreach. And so we're really looking forward to doing that in the next coming year to focus on rural and remote communities.
Wonderful to hear. Thank you.
And I'd add that, they're existing as of now, if you're an employer, and you should think about, do you belong to your local immigration partnership table? So I know our host organization, CHIO, sits at the Ottawa Lip. And those are really your people of the community who can support your newcomer employees, will make you attuned to what are the issues they're facing and what supports are available. So I know, I'm obviously more familiar being housed in Ottawa, but in the Pembroke region, they have a local immigration partnership, and they really do work with employers purposefully to augment their sense of welcoming newcomers. They work with other folks to say, hey, maybe we're not a large population. So we maybe, for instance, don't have many Muslims in our community. But what are the virtual things that can make them feel like they're connected to their religious community? And also, how can we augment awareness in our community of the Muslim population, and create a sense of welcoming as a community, so they don't feel like I don't belong in this rural society, therefore I'll go to a larger urban center. So there are things you can do now. We're going to have a more fulsome, as Kathleen said, attention and toolkit specifically for rural in the next year. But meanwhile, think about connecting to those local immigration partnership tables. They're wonderful, welcoming spaces. They would love to have more healthcare represented. They have all of the others. They've got, housing, they'll have the city, they'll have police, they have schools. The people are there. That's like a mini representation of your community. So I encourage you connecting to them.
Thank you very much. Great to have those details for the rural communities. I do have a question, physician related. What types of jobs can you do while you are going through the licensing process? So this individual is really looking for possible pathways and advice on where N4 can direct them.
Yeah, it's tough, right? Our goal is physicians to be physicians in Canada, but I get it. There is quite the process. There's if you attend the ITP session on April 19th, you'll hear more about that. But, there are organizations who help support folks to be optimally employed. So maybe it's not a physician, your credentials can't be fully recognized in Canada. And, if you don't want to redo your residency, which many don't, they want to get started in some kind of career. So those organizations like EMGA are really helpful to align to what else can I do. They in Alberta have a clinical assistant program, which is helpful. It's not a regulated profession, and so they can give advice about that. I have heard of settlement gearing a lot of these professionals towards being medical interpreters. That's another career, but again, it breaks my heart. I know it's better than, recently we had a reach out from a Ukrainian physician who's literally working on an auto assembly line and has another part-time job in a Wendy's to support her and her daughter. They believe her male spouse is behind in Ukraine fighting. But that breaks my heart, right? To think about people working at Wendy's. So maybe a medical interpreter is better. Ideally, I'd love to see that physician. She's actually a family physician. Wouldn't we love to have her as a family physician? So connect with EMGA, I guess, is my short answer, but hopefully you'll keep going towards full licensure, because that's actually what we need in Canada.
Absolutely. Thank you, Christine. I have a question. Can a centralized office be responsible for providing information at the national level rather than each province providing licensing path and immigration information? So they're looking at a centralized office being responsible for providing information at a national level rather than each province providing licensing path and immigration information. If that question is...
Yeah, I think the work we're doing, that's a complexity, right? So we heard clearly from our consulting tables of internationally educated nurses and physicians, they hear about Canada and, there's a lot of positive about Canada. I think we've talked about the negatives, but we have nurses who are here who have they tell us, I've had 4 job offers from the States, but I don't want to move to the States. They watch the news like we all do. That's not a country where they want to be. They prefer the mosaic approach that we have in Canada. What they'd like to hear, they also said, is that they'd like to understand what is the landscape of Canada. So I may choose my province according to who's offering what. That does create that interprovincial competition, but we heard that very much. I'm not surprised to hear that as a question, that they want a centralized spot. So that's our plan. Catherine talked about, we are going to have visual pathways for physicians and for nurses on our website. So that will guide them and say, okay, well, here's generally the process, but our plan is also to have an associating toolkit to say, if you go to Ontario, here's how it looks, PEI, it looks this way. So then they can make an informed decision around where am I most likely to get credentials. There's a lot of movement towards, when the HESA report came out, one of their things is pushing for national licensure. And so I know the nurses, the associations across Canada are also pushing for that, as are the physicians. So hopefully we'll see that and we'll see less variation. But until that time, that's our plan, is to provide information by province so people can make informed decisions and see. And on the converse side, let the provinces compare to each other. So maybe they'll, you come to the highest, standard amongst the provinces on what do they offer, because right now there's such disparity. So Ontario has this funded SPEP program for nurses who all they're missing is their recency of practice. So if you come to Canada as a nurse, and then you start this process, I got to get my credentials, recognize I have to take a language test. I have to do some bridging program schooling to meet the Canadian standard. By the time they do that, in order to have a license as a nurse, I need to have 3 months experience within the past 2 years. And that time I run out on me, the clock may have run out. So SPEP programs, we'll talk more about this at the IEN presentation on April 26th. That's a way for nurses to get experience in hospitals, be hosted at hospitals when they've done their NCLEX exam, they have everything else, but they just need that recency of practice. Then that provides the opportunity. There's nothing in Canada right now to do that for physicians. So we have physicians who go back to their home countries to try and maintain their recency of practice. So huge expense, emotional and financial for those physicians who do that, but that's our current system.
Thank you, Christine, for sharing those details. I think we probably have time for one more question. Obviously, there's been lots of interest and questions popping up, which we can take offline. They were just asking one of the attendees if any hospital or organizations have similar programs in Alberta. So obviously interest, and is there anything that we could direct this individual to?
I'm not sure. I'm totally fine. I wonder if they meant something similar to MGA outside of Alberta, but MGA is national. So I would start with it's AIMGA. Yeah.
And we can share that
that's
information in the chat.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Fantastic. So I think with that, we'll end our question session and wrap up our presentation today. I would like to obviously give big thanks to Christine and Catherine for taking time to do this presentation today and share all this fantastic information with our members. Many thanks to you, the audience, for joining us and engaging with us today.